Hi, my name is Chris Jackson. I'm a business attorney. I've been one for 25 years. Today I'm going to show you how to create your own residential lease agreement for the state of California, such that by the end of the video, you will be able to download for free a lease agreement that is ready based on your particular situation to present to a tenant in the state of California. It's my dog. He's chewing on a squeaky toy right beneath me. Come here, Jim. Oh, he's just like you're like a big baby. You're like a teddy bear, huh? You're like a teddy bear, Jaxie. Look at the camera. Say hi to the camera. Say hi. Say hi, Jax. Yeah. Okay, I gotta get back to my video, okay? You don't mind, right? Okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The link to where I want you to go is under my video in the description. I will also put it in the comment section in my comment and pin that to the top. I will see you at the screen share. Thank you. Okay, if you selected the link under my video in the description or in the comments section, you would have arrived here. You'll see you can obtain a free residential lease agreement. First question is, what type of property is being rented? In this example, I'm going to use a house, but as you can see, if you're renting out an apartment or the basement in your house or a condo or duplex or mobile home or room in your house or townhouse or other, you have other options. So I'm going to go ahead and select create my document. Okay, where is a rental property located? Many of the concepts are going to be the same for each state, but there are some state-specific questions that apply. And for this video, I'm going to focus on California. However, I will be doing other videos on popular rental apartment or home states, including Texas and Arizona and Florida and others. So for this purpose, I'm choosing California. Okay, the next question is contract type. What type of lease agreement do you want? Standard agreement, which is most popular, or comprehensive agreement. So you can go over here to frequently asked questions and determine whether you need comprehensive agreement versus a standard agreement. So if you're going to have any restrictions in your lease with respect to home business use, the tenant having a guarantor, whether the property is furnished or not, or if you're using a property manager, you're going to want to choose comprehensive agreement. I think that's probably best. You can always skip over anything that doesn't apply. Save and continue. Okay, so we've arrived here at lease term. The question is, what type of lease term do you want? I'm assuming that you're going to want a fixed term of at least 1 year. Based on that assumption, I have chosen an August 1st, 2023 start date. Exactly 1 year later is July 31st, 2024. Save and continue. Next question is, will the tenant be allowed to move in before the lease start date? And I've had this question asked to me on my own rental property, and sometimes people want to move in without starting to pay rent. I don't think that that's fair to the owner to do that. As soon as the tenant is going to take possession of that property is when the lease should commence. The answer is no. They will not be allowed to move in prior to the commencement of the start date. Where in California is a rental property located? Okay, that's where you enter your address. Additional property details. Would you like to describe the rental property in more detail? If you select yes, you can enter some more information. No, in my case, it's a single family home, so there's really not much more to describe. For example, if you're doing the basement or a room in your house, you may want to specify the room. Second question is, do you want to attach photos of the property after printing the document? No, that's not normally done. I'm not going to do that. Feel free to do that if you like. Just make sure that you do a walkthrough with your tenant and take some photos to make sure that you have a before picture to compare it to an after picture when the tenant is ready to move out. Who is the landlord? Is the landlord an individual or a corporate organization? Hopefully, if you're following my other videos, you're not going to put it in your individual name. Instead, you're going to put it in the name of an LLC. So I'm just going to choose Home Rental LLC is the name of my organization, and that will be the only landlord. There's no reason to add another one. Save and continue. Okay, landlord contact. Will a property manager look after the property? I'm going to answer no here because I'm assuming you're not using a property manager, because if you are using a property manager, oftentimes a property manager will have their own form of residential lease that they prefer to use, that their lawyers have approved. And so I'm going to say no. Question is, how can the landlord be contacted? And you can put in a number here, you can put in an email, give them both of those options. Save and continue. Who will be paying rent? Okay, so you want to make sure that you put, of course, the tenant's name. I was going to say John Doe, but John Doe actually makes more sense because they pay the rent that's due. Jane Doe is John Doe's wife. Will any minors or other occupants who have not signed the lease be allowed to live in the property? Okay, so if you know they have children, let's identify them. Let's make it very specific in this lease who can live in the property. You do not want a situation where you're leasing it out to John Doe and Jane Doe, and you find out later that their cousin and their cousin's kids and also their own kids and others are living in the property. I would be very specific as to who is living in the property, who has the right to be there. Okay, so if you choose yes, it's going to say here, would you like to list which occupants are allowed? The answer is yes. And let's just add their son Andy. Okay. And no others. Save and continue. How can the tenants be contacted? You're going to enter the phone number here and their email. Will anyone else sign the lease and be responsible for rent if the tenants do not pay? I'm not sure if you're going to require a guarantor. This would really only come into play if the tenants themselves had poor credit and or income that you think is insufficient. Or let's say you have a rental property in a college town and you're going to be leasing your rental property out primarily to students who don't have income necessarily or a credit history, and you want to make sure that you have their parents as guarantors. The rent needs to be paid and the lease needs to be complied with. And if it's not, you can go after everyone that's a tenant, or in this case, we're going to say the tenants and the guarantors. And the guarantor in this case would be, say, the father of the individual tenant. But in our case, we're going to say no because we're renting it out to a married couple with their own kids. Parking. Will tenants have access to parking? You say yes. The question is whether it will be exclusive. You can say yes, and then this is where you want to describe it. And I think that you should be specific here, even in a single family home. You don't want too many cars at or in front of or in the driveway of your house on a regular basis. I don't think your neighbors will appreciate that. Maybe you state something like that, really depending upon your situation. If you have an HOA that doesn't, for example, allow people to park overnight on the street, and that has happened to me in one community, which I like. But if there is that restriction, just take that into account and make sure that whatever you are allowing the tenants to do is in compliance with the HOA guidelines. Save and continue. Is the property furnished? In my case, the property is not furnished. If it is furnished, you need to list the furnishings that will be provided. Be very specific about what is and what is not included. Save and continue. Is smoking allowed indoors? No. Is vaping allowed indoors? No. Are home businesses allowed? Okay, well, let's just say someone has a home business. If it's a service business, or maybe they're using your home office in your rental property to conduct a business, you want to be very specific about what is and what is not included. Do you want a mechanic shop, for example, in the garage of your rental property where they're drilling things or cutting things or making a lot of noise? If you're not sure, I would just say no, save and continue. Will the tenant be given the option to purchase the property? If you want an option to purchase contract, you really should hire an attorney at this point. So I'm saying no. And by the way, with the option to purchase, the tenant can always make an offer to purchase the property. The question is whether you're going to give a discount based on some of the rent that they paid, and that's something you can negotiate later. Rent. Will the tenants pay rent monthly? Yes. How much will the tenants pay per month? Just say the rental is $3,000. What day of the month will the rent be paid? It's typical that it's paid on the first day of the month. Save and continue. What form of payment will the landlord accept? Cash, check, direct debit, Venmo, other. I don't know if you want to accept checks. Nowadays, most people don't have checks, and checks can bounce, unlike these. And for other, I was just going to say Zelle or cashier's check. Okay, this is a California-specific law. And the question is the property exempt from the Tenant Protection Act of 2019? They give you a summary of what that is here, and this is very California-like. It's a form of rent control that can apply statewide rather than, say, in San Francisco or certain jurisdictions or certain buildings where they have rent control. There are a lot of exceptions to this. One is a single-family home where the property is not owned by either a corporation, LLC with at least one corporate member, or a real estate trust. So let's say you own this property, it's in California, it is owned by an LLC, and the member of the LLC is you, the individual, rather than a corporation. Then the exemption would apply here. If the exemption applies, you have to give notice that it applies to the tenant. So in my case, I'm ignoring this, select no if you're unsure, because there is a clear exemption here that I know applies in my case. So I'm going to say yes, it applies. And you'll see later in the lease that the Tenant Protection Act of 2019 doesn't apply and the tenant has notice thereof. Okay, next section is rent increase. The question is, how many days of notice will you give before increasing the rent? I would just put legal minimum. And note that this doesn't apply if you have a fixed term rental agreement that allows for rent increases already, because that will be in your lease. So you don't need to give notice. Save and continue. Will a security deposit be required? Yes, absolutely. I recommend that always. It says here in California, a landlord may charge a tenant the equivalent of 2 months rent for the security deposit if the residence is unfurnished, and 3 months rent if the residence is furnished. You can add an additional 1/2 month's rent if the tenant has a waterbed. In our case, it's unfurnished. I'm going to charge the maximum, which is 2 months rent, which is $6,000 total. Would you like to disclose which bank holds the security deposit? No, it's none of their business. How many days does a landlord have to return the security deposit if the tenant fulfills their lease obligation? I'm stating once again, use the legal maximum, which is 21 calendar days after the tenant has moved out. You want the most amount of time possible to determine what damage, if any, exists in your rental property, so you can then determine how much, if any, of the security deposit to return. Save and continue. Are pets allowed on the property? Okay, the default here is no. You can choose yes, and then you can specify which pets are allowed. Oftentimes you're going to specify that dogs only under a certain weight. You could also choose here only if the landlord gives written approval. You can see here under which pets are allowed, one small dog under 50 pounds. And I would not want to exclude my dog or a dog like mine from a rental property because he's great. All right, he's just great. Save and continue. Okay, so here you can charge an additional pet deposit or fee, which I also recommend because pets can cause damage, and this fee can be non-refundable or refundable. specify the pet fee amount. It says here in California, a separate pet deposit can be charged, but the total of all deposits cannot be more than 2 months rent for an unfurnished rental property or 3 months rent for a furnished rental property. So I'm going to just say no, okay? Because I've already reached the maximum, which is $6,000, which is 2 months rent. I cannot charge anything else in California because that is California. Save and continue. Next section is utility details. Who will be responsible for paying utility costs? You have the option of saying tenant pays for all utilities, which I am going to choose. But if you wanted to pay for anything, say water or sewer, internet, I don't know why you would pay for any of these items. Tenant pays for all utilities. Save and continue. Will the tenant be responsible for any maintenance? Okay, for example, fixtures and heating, sidewalk, driveways, grass, and garden. So in many rental properties, the owner is responsible for the gardening because we want to make sure that the gardening gets done properly because this is your property. You don't want it to lose value because the tenant decided either not to do anything because they wanted to save money, or they hired a gardener that did not come often enough, and this can devalue your property. In my case, I'm just going to say no. Will the tenants be required to pay any insurance costs? Yes. And they should pay for insurance that covers damage to the rental property at a very minimum. Personal injury on the property. You can do all three. Tenant to provide proof of insurance upon request. Most tenant insurances will cover all these things. Just make sure that it covers what you want it to cover. Save and continue. How much will tenants be charged for not sufficient funds checks? You have to put something here, even though in my case I'm not going to accept any checks. I'm just going to say $100. Do you want to charge the tenants for late rent payments? Yes, of course. Okay, so that can be a fixed charge per late payment, a fixed charge per day, a percentage of rent, other. Okay, so the question is, how many days can pass before the late fee is charged? Typical is 5. I'm saying 5. How much is the late charge? And here I have selected fixed charge per late payment. And I'm going to say $100. Save and continue. How much notice must the landlord give before entering the property for a non-emergency? Again, I recommend the legal minimum, which is 24 hours for a non-emergency. You want to have the right to enter your property for any reason upon a certain amount of notice. In this case, it's 24 hours. How much notice must be given before terminating the lease? Again, legal minimum. You can evict for just cause in the following situations in California, etc., etc. Save and continue. Will the landlord be required to make any improvements on the property? No. In this case, there are no improvements needed. I don't want to offer them unless that's part of a deal I make with the tenant. Will the tenants receive any signing incentives? Don't understand why you would do that, but if it's very competitive and it's a tenant market, maybe I could understand that, but in this case, the answer is no. Tenant improvements. So these are improvements to the property that the tenant would make. So let's say they want to paint a wall and you're okay with that. I would just say, yes, they are allowed, but only with your consent. Okay, next section is address for payment of rent. Again, I'm not having them send rent to me by check. If you are, you would put the address in here. I'm going to state here payment options provided by landlords. So I'm going to give them, say, my Zelle account information or my wire transfer account information, or however I'm going to receive the rent from them. I'm going to provide that in a separate piece of paper. Save and continue. Environmental disclosures. This has to do with lead-based paint and also asbestos. So the question is, when was your rental property built? In my case, it's 1981 or later. So they know what, if any, disclosures to put in the lease. Save and continue. Is a property located in a special flood hazard area or an area of potential flooding? This is something that you should have learned when you purchase the property. If you're not sure, you need to find out. In my case, the answer is no. Okay, next section, dispute resolution. How will disputes be resolved? And you have some options here. You can say mediation, arbitration, mediation. And if that doesn't work out, then arbitration. I'm going to say do not include in the contract. That way you have the most leeway if you want to go to the courts and you want to evict your tenant. In most cases, any dispute that we're talking about is a dispute where the landlord's going to take action, so you're going to take action. I don't want any restrictions on that. You should be able to go to the court. That's usually the fastest way to resolve a dispute or evict a tenant. So that's what I'm going to choose. Save and continue. Can the tenant assign or sublease the property? And the options are only with landlord's consent. And if you want that option at a later date and you want that in the contract, you can put only with landlord's consent. I'm just going to say no. Okay, the next item is renewal. Will the tenant have the option to renew the lease? Okay, so you have a few options here. You can choose yes with the same terms, which I would not choose. I would choose this if you're going to give them the option to begin with, which I'm not going to do. We can always renew the lease by entering into a new lease. And I might have some terms in there that were not included in the original lease that after having experienced this tenant, I want to include in the new lease. But if you want to give them the option to renew without entering into a new lease, you should probably choose either this option here, yes with same terms except rent, or yes, specify terms. If you choose this, then you can specify how much rent can increase. I'm going to say no, do not include in the contract. Okay, next question is, will the tenant pay a re-rent charge if they break the lease by leaving early? You can consult this here. If you say yes, you have to specify the amount. So I'm just going to say no, save and continue, because I do not want to have to specify an amount, which may limit how much I can recover. Lost keys. If the tenant loses a key, will they be required to pay for replacement locks and keys? Yes, of course. Inspection report. Will a walkthrough inspection report be completed at the start and end of the lease? Yes, I recommend you do this. Additional clauses. Do you want to include any additional terms or information? It says here most people do not need to create additional clauses, but if you have some additional clauses that you'd like to include, you can include them here. I'm going to say no, save and continue. Signing details. When will the lease be signed? If you're not sure, you can say unsure here and you can fill it in later. If you know it's going to be signed on a specific date, you can choose that date. Let's say that I know that we're going to sign it tomorrow, Monday, July 17th. That's when it's going to take effect. In essence, they will be bound by the terms and they have to start paying rent and commencing rent as of August 1st, which is the beginning of the term in my example. But if you're not sure, you can say unsure and it will simply be blank. So you see here this lease dated Monday, July 17th, 2023. Okay, so that's the signing date here. Again, if you left that blank, it would be blank and you could just fill it in at the time you sign it. And you'll see that the tenants are here, the landlord is here. It allows you to preview the lease here. So go through and read this, and you have the option here of writing in some additional clauses. If you do write those in, I recommend that you get the tenant to initial them, and you should initial them yourself. If there's something that you have not filled in here, you have the opportunity to fill it in by hand. Okay, the disclosure is here, which they have to also sign that they've received it. Okay, so the next page is where you determine what license you want. So I'm going to say select a license. All right, so you have three options. As I said, you can do this for free. You can download this for free. You have to do that within 1 week. What they make you do is sign up for a subscription. You provide a credit card number and they give you access to this residential lease for 1 week. And if you don't cancel your subscription within that 1 week period, which you can do at any time during that 1 week period, they will charge you $35 per month. after the free trial ends. So if your intent is to obtain this, download it, print it out, and that's the one you're going to use, make sure you do it within the week period, and this residential lease will be free to you. Your other option here is that you can pay a one-time charge of $44 for this residential lease agreement. And what this allows you to do is to edit, print, download, update your residential lease agreement for up to 5 years. So let's say you want to make some changes to it, or you want to be able to access it for the next tenant. You can go back in there and make changes through your portal. And then the last option here is you can prepay for 1 year, which is the equivalent of $8.99 a month. It says you save 74% here. Instead of $35 a month, you're paying $8.99 a month. And what that allows you to do ultimately is access your residential lease agreement and also hundreds of other documents that you can choose from, that you can download and use as needed. Just note that if you choose this one or this one and you use my link, then you will be entitled to a 10% discount on whatever you choose, and that discount will be applied during the checkout process. Thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you have your residential lease agreement downloaded. If you have any questions about the residential lease agreement or this video, or any questions in general, go ahead and put them in the comments section underneath my video. I get to the comments on a regular basis. I answer everybody's questions. If you like the video, I encourage you to give me a thumbs up. And if you want more content like this, free contracts or information about business or law, etc., I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And I thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best. Have a great day.